You cannot play Romeo.
What? Why not? I'm perfect for the role. I'm perfect. I will not let that oaf Spencer have another go at one of my roles. No.
I want to make this movie as authentic as possible. And it's about Shakespeare, it's about, you know, the theater, and it's about London theater, and I think English actors can relate better to that.
Fraud! Charlatan! A counterfeiter of wit!
And they speak all these accents which are appropriate for being a commoner or like being a nobleman.
Have you seen Lord Essex?
I believe he is still in the viewing chamber with Her Majesty.
And then in general, throughout my career, I worked a lot with English actors, and I just fell in love with them.
Soul of the age. The applause, delight, the wonder of our stage. Though he couldn't prevent the public theatres from becoming ever more popular.
Sir Derek Jacobi, I'm a fan of his. I mean, there's nobody better. And when you like kind of say what Jacobi says at the beginning, you have to say it with conviction, and no actor really can quite act conviction.
Our Shakespeare. For he is all of ours, is he not?
And then we also kind of thought when the movie comes out, we need people behind us who can, you know, defend us, you know, and defend what we're doing, you know, because they think it's a very important movie to do for the reason what they believe in.
William Shakespeare, however, spent his remaining days not in the playhouse, but in the small town of his birth, Stratford-upon-Avon.
I invited pretty much all English actors of note who wanted to meet me and liked the script in my house, and asked them, so what you would like to play in this film? And it was very interesting what they said. And Rhys, he said, I know that probably everybody would like see me as William Shakespeare, but I would love to play Edward de Vere. And then asked him why.
I thought that the character of Oxford was fascinating, but I wasn't sure whether that's why they wanted me in, you know, so I said to Roland, well, I guess if you want an easy ride with it, I guess you'd offer me Shakespeare, but if you want to be a brave man, give me a crack at Oxford.
You shall begin rehearsals immediately. It must not be performed until I tell you, and you may only have a day's notice.
He said like a very simple thing. Well, I'm an eccentric, and he was.
Death to the French!
That's like what triggered it to me, you know, it's like slowly but surely in my head, you know, I saw a reason in it. And he did such a terrific job that it was a no-brainer.
Are you possessed?
Maybe I am.
He pretty much always transformed already on the set. He came as Rhys Ifans, he went into the makeup and hair trailer and came out as Edward de Vere, and he behaved differently. When he was in costume or on the set, he behaved differently. He was Edward de Vere.
Your voice is completely different from mine.
Voice! You have no voice! That's why I chose you!
I remember when I went to drama school and I had to do like a posh, that's what we call it, a posh accent. The only way I could do it was to be really, really, really camp.
A romantic tragedy.
So gradually over the years, it's an accent, you know, you learn and acquire, and it's fun to do. And actually, if you play it a little posher than general standard English, I find it easier, you know, because you get to indulge your diphthongs a little more, and it becomes more of a kind of culinary escapade as opposed to a vocal one.
All art is political, Johnson, otherwise it would just be decoration. And all artists have something to say, otherwise they'd make shoes.
So I guess that in simplistic terms, between me and Roland, what we've come up with is David Bowie meets Karl Lagerfeld, and I'm their bastard son.
Delicious, isn't it? Right out of a Greek tragedy.
It's great, you know, slapping on a lot of makeup. You don't often get to do that in film, especially, you know. Both kind of agreed that this guy, you know, because of his distance from the rest of the world, you know, be it the court or the public, he's his own man and his own creation, you know, like all his characters.
Neither they nor I conspired against you. Cecil alone was our aim.
The King of Spain, Mary Queen of Scots, 4 French kings, 8 popes, they all wanted me dead. But here I am.
I'm a lifelong fan of Vanessa Redgrave, and I worked with her daughter before in The Patriot. And when I discussed the first go-around with John Orloff casting, which always like good when you like write a script or work on a script, you see casting possibilities, because he asked me how you want to do all these different time zones, because at first in the script there were no flashbacks.
Compose something.
Now?
Yes, now.
On what subject, Your Grace?
On truth.
I kind of said, these flashbacks are important to understand where Edward de Vere comes from. And without that, it would not work for me. So one of his first questions said, well, you will have then to cast. And I say, look, there's, for example, one example. There's Vanessa Redgrave and there's Jolie Richards. Perfect.
We are glad of your return from the continent. 2 years is too long without such excellent amusements.
And he said, yeah, that's a really good idea. It was for me absolute joy that they wanted to be in the movie. I mean, I remember when like Vanessa Redgrave came in my house and I was like very nervous, and very end she asked a very simple question to me. So do you want me to play Queen Elizabeth? I said, yes. And she like hugged me and was so excited.
Comedy or tragedy?
Comedy, Majesty.
By whom?
By Anonymous, Your Majesty.
At one point I asked her and I said like, why did you kind of want to play this part? And she said to me, all her life she wanted to play that part, which I think she does an incredible job.
Majesty.
I would say probably the time of Elizabeth I is full of more contradictions, more developments, more intricate politics than any time preceding it. The son of Mary, she tried to take my throne. No son of hers will ever rule. I'm quite used to seeing Elizabeth I as an extremely fascinating, contradictory, and elusive person. You caused this. Your play, your words, I know what you've done.
And then I'm so proud of Jolie too. I think she wanted to show that she's not only cast because she's the daughter of Vanessa Redgrave.
How dare you! How dare you! I command you to leave my presence! What attracted me to Anonymous? Well, first of all, I heard that Roland was doing it, and Roland and I worked together just over 10 years ago on The Patriot. And just as an actor, there's something really nice about working with someone a second time or a third time. I think because it sort of strangely happens quite rarely in our work. And then before I'd read the script, I then found out that it was to play young Elizabeth. And it just sort of, as an actress, it doesn't really get much better. You'll stay in England and in my chambers. And I think in Roland's story, in Anonymous, we see a different Elizabeth who is volatile, is passionate, struggles to find her feet, and then makes the ultimate sacrifices of head over heart and her reign over her happiness. In this, we do see her as a very full-blooded, passionate woman, not at all the sort of colder virgin queen that people might imagine. I am with child, and I wish to marry him.
Marry him. He is already married.
I can do what I want.
Edward, our poet, Earl, has returned to court.
It was just a play.
And do you know how long it took me to banish them from her presence? She adores them!
Okay, very good.
Cecil is such a wonderful villain, such a loathsome, perfidious, manipulative character, which I always prefer those kind of parts. It's a very substantial role to try and play, not least because he ages so much.
Tell him Essex will not return from Ireland alive.
And he's a real historical character. He was Queen Elizabeth I's chief advisor. He was a Lord Treasurer and a Secretary of State. And he was a very, very, very powerful man in the court of Queen Elizabeth I, probably the most powerful man. And so for the purposes of this story, he is controlling the puppet strings with a motivation which is maybe fictional, in that he's trying to fix the succession to the throne for King James.
Edward wishes to choose the next king.
I shall convince her to send Essex to Ireland to quell the Catholic rebellion. And if God is watching, neither will return alive.
I think that's why the Elizabethan age is so fascinating to us, because I think it's filled with horror. So I can't believe he was a kindly, avuncular soul if he was in the position he was in. So it's kind of fitting that this should be the portrayal of him in this film, albeit in the context of this theory.
Thou shalt not worship false idols in my household. Your everlasting soul hangs in the balance, not poems, your soul.
My poems are my soul.
I play Oxford of the De Vere household. His father passes away and he's brought to the Cecil household.
Are you going to live here forever?
No, only until I reach my maturity. Particularly the young Oxford is incredibly arrogant. He knows he's got this capability to write the most beautiful thing that you've ever read in your entire life. And I think that's something that both Rhys and I spoke to Roland about, and I think that's something that we both wanted to show in the piece. And composition, poetry.
Lord, we believe such activities to be the worship of false idols and therefore a sin before the eyes of God.
I think the character of Oxford demands this air of arrogance.
Which country did you like the best on your travels, my lord?
And that's something that I think we've gone through throughout the entire film. I would say Italy.
Why is that?
The women, when they want something, they take it.
Have you ever been arrested before, Mr. Johnson?
I'm a writer, aren't I? Of course I've bloody well been arrested.
Well, in the film, we see him, before he wrote the plays for which he's best known, he's still a struggling playwright, trying to find an audience. And he's a bullish idealist. And I think, like most idealists, he gets a reality check because he is arrested for writing a seemingly seditious play.
This play is seditious and will not continue. It's a comedy, for God's sake. There's nothing seditious about it.
Oh, is that right, is it?
He gets kind of dragged into this plot by Oxford to influence the succession.
Sounds rolling.
For the purposes of the film, it's more interesting if Johnson is ignorant of Shakespeare's plan to lay claim to the plays.
Will?
Johnson tumbles through this film, desperately trying to claw his way out and act as an individual, and he fails.
I want to thank my actors.
The William Shakespeare that I'm playing is an actor, first and foremost, and he is the kind of most famous actor of his day. He is a guy from Stratford, so he's provincial, and he's kind of working class, and he's just a normal bloke who gets put into this extraordinary circumstance.
So you are the famous William Shakespeare.
And he runs with it.
I need more money.
I beg your pardon. The way I see his journey through it is that he starts off as a guy who loves acting. It's his passion and his main love.
I'm an actor, every inch of me.
But at the same time, what he loves equally is the adulation that brings, because he has a massive ego, and he is given money to keep it a secret that he didn't write these plays. And so the adulation that he gets from people thinking that he did write these plays is huge. So he goes from someone who loves art and adulation to someone who is happy just having the adulation. But there's other ways of looking at it. I'm playing a character who needs to legitimise the things he's doing. So in his mind, he kills Marlowe because Marlowe is going to tell people that he's a fraud.
It's that playwright, Kit Marlowe. It's not right. No, it's not.
Henry V by no one.
And why would any of you admit to trying to better me in historical drama?
Marlowe is part of a group called the Mermaid's Wits, and they drink at the Mermaid's Tavern. He usually associates with Thomas Dekker and Thomas Nash, and Ben Jonson is part of that circle. It's like a kind of actors' club, if you like. At that time, Marlowe definitely would have been the main man writing plays and stuff, so there'd be a lot of ego knocking around, and I'd be right at the forefront of that, dishing out and not taking very much back.
By the beard, that's Edward de Vere, the Earl of Oxford.
I wonder if he needs any material. Certainly not any of yours.
and that so lamely and unfashionable that the dogs bark at me. Ah, come on. Burbage, you
I wanted to have actually Mark Rylance in a more important part in this film, and he really also wanted to do it, but he had theater commitments, he couldn't get out. And then he actually proposed he wants to be one of the theater players.
They'll have me arrested.
Arrested? It's just the one performance. Go on.
I need a drink. I'll be at the Mermaid. I'll be back in a minute.
It just happens, like time-wise, you know, it worked out that he can play Prologue and Richard III.
All the clouds that lowered upon our house in the deep bosom of the ocean.
It was a magical moment for everybody, for the crew, for me. I think I got terribly lucky this time because it's a really, really good script. The ensemble is incredible this time around. I just try to immerse myself in a world and in a story and try to make it as a good possible movie as I can. Also, I love to discover people, and I think I made some big discoveries.
Thank you!
I got involved with Anonymous because I was one of the visual effects supervisors together with Volker Engel in 2012. Roland was pretty happy with us, so he said, hey, why don't you guys help me out a little bit on my small project that's coming up now. It's about Shakespeare. We thought, wow, that's quite intriguing because it's something that Roland has never done before.
When Mark, my business partner, and I read the script, we immediately said, we want to do it.
I said I want to also like kind of show how London of that time looked. And for that you have to show wide shots. And these wide shots don't exist.
These kind of dramas are usually fairly small, few people in rooms, moving from one room to the next. This is something where in between those small dramatic situations, he really shows wide vistas of London as it was in the 16th century.
The big challenge is really to recreate 16th century London Bridge, the Tower of London, everything that looks either completely different today or doesn't exist at all anymore.
In the first incarnation, I wanted to build a huge model of whole London. Now I don't have to do that anymore because visual effects got so advanced that you can do this in the computer. And I had the luck that Volker and Mark wanted to do the movie. And it's also for them a challenge, and me it's a challenge to kind of do in a smaller budget movie, you know, amazing visual effects where you like kind of simply have the feeling you are there. It will be very interesting because I think people have not seen that. They've seen this in 3 or 4 or 5 shots, but not like where nearly 150 shots, you know, where you like just see London. For us it was great because we can shoot everything on stage, just much cheaper, but you have to know what you're doing. And we'll like kind of find him here like this.
They are to be beheaded.
It's very important to include the visual effects side from the get-go because it can also help you save a lot of money when you're on a more limited budget. And Roland, being a very visual director, is just amazing with this. He understands the visual effects world, so it's basically like playing ping pong. It's a wonderful collaboration.
You're like kind of pacing here, and then all of a sudden you look up in this direction. Up there is the tower.
And action! When does it arrive?
By the stroke of 4. The streets are quiet.
People always think that visual effects is a post-production process. It's by far not anymore. We are starting earlier than anybody else, really, not only doing our research, doing the designs, but already building the sets. Before even the real sets are being built by the construction department, we're already building the fake sets in the computer. And that is a very, very long process. In this case, it will take a little bit over a year. So it's very important that we're involved extremely early and also to make decisions about what actually will be built for real, what will be extended by us, or what will be entirely done in the computer.
We have a lot of green screen in this movie, and we actually have a set that's called the arch set. And so we sometimes have an arch in the foreground, an arch in the background, and people are walking through it or riding through it. They're on a cobblestone street. So everything you have is actually these two set pieces and the street surface, and everything else surrounding it is green. When it's the London Bridge, we are going to add the River Thames, Tower of London in the background, and the rest of the city in the background.
The art department is really the starting point for everything that we're doing, because first, anything that we do has to be historically accurate, has to be designed first. A lot of the places like the London Bridge, like some of the palaces, like the old Whitehall Palace, simply doesn't exist anymore. So we have to recreate those and have to make sure it is historically accurate. So that starts with the art department. The art department does designs, which can be 2D drawings, can be a collection of photographs of modern buildings that have been put together. And they also start with actually 3D models that we're getting from them as a basis. We're taking all that, refining it, making it photoreal, lighting it, adapting it to all the camera angles, and put it in the picture.
God save the Queen!
We had a very ambitious script, so many scenes in different places, so we had to really come up with interesting concepts. What we very fast learned is that the Elizabethan architecture is very formulaic. It always the same windows in different sizes, has different wall heights, has very similar materials. So what we actually invented is the module system. We built 3 different sizes from modules and had like kind of different doors, different windows, different fireplaces. And out of these like modules, we built many different sets. So every wall of our movie is 10 or 20 times in the movie. But because it's lit differently and it's dressed differently, you never ever know.
Cecil will not let her see a letter without reading it first.
I will not send a letter. I will send a book.
These are the small modules, and the idea of these modules was to create with little pieces as many sets as possible. Basically, you have all these elements, and with these elements we create then for the small modules, I think something like 14 different sets. For the big modules, I think we create something like 10 different sets, and for the medium modules, something like 8.
My Lord of Oxford.
Majesty.
What you see here is basically we started what you see the kitchen, which is Hedingham Castle, where we see young Oxford after the Midsummer Night's Play when the Queen Elizabeth comes in to ask him whether he really wrote Midsummer Night's Dream himself.
Your father tells me you wrote this evening's play yourself.
I did indeed, Your Majesty.
Overnight, we're going to take all the walls out and rejiggle them, and then it becomes this set, which is the changing room for when Essex and Southampton play tennis and they change their clothes afterwards. After that, it's gonna change into the Mermaid's Tavern, which you see over there. And afterwards, it changes into the torture room, the prison cell of Oxford and Southampton in the Tower. And then afterwards, that's gonna change into Pole's room, which Roland wanted to have long and narrow because Pole is very narrow-minded. And then it changes into the little prison cell of Johnson.
I can bring you so much pain.
So basically these are the big modules, which have a few less pieces but much bigger pieces. And here the idea was how can we create different looks between places like Hampton Court, Whitehall Palace and Cecil House.
This is how I suggest we keep your noble head from the executioner's block.
Cecil Great Hall will transform into Whitehall Palace, which is this big Great Hall. And the idea is also that mainly we never have any ceilings because our wall elements are quite high. And in case we do see a ceiling, then Mark and Volker come in and put a CG element on top.
I'm going to build my own theatre, one that properly fits the scale of my work.
Impossible. Our set is much more closer to how these theatres really looked than actually the Globe in England, because the Globe in England, they had to enlarge in diameter because of fire reasons. I think it feels more authentic.
Well, it's certainly big.
I promise you, Edward, you've seen nothing like it before.
Nothing. There won't be puppets, will there?
Basically, there's only a foundation and only really one interior picture existing. From the exterior, there's several illustrations from painters from that time, but it's not really accurate what you see there. I wanted it to look a little bit more like a tower, so that's why the footprint is slightly slimmer and therefore it's also slightly tilted to the top, so it looks almost like a battlement tower.
God be with you all! Francesco, do you see? Do you see?
We try to, as we are building the rose and the globe, that you really see the difference between the two. The rose is supposed to be a little bit more rural and almost looking like a farm. It's woody and it's very dark and dramatic in color. It's also, we say it's about 20 years standing when we are shooting it, whereas the globe is kind of brand new and it's Shakespeare's first theater, so the idea here is that he would have copied from the influence from court, so it would be looking a little bit like a nobleman's dress. That was the idea. It's very colorful and very rich in ornaments, so it really sparkles.
There was anything quite like it. And you saw I was mad for building a bigger theater.
We also studied paintings of the time, and we realized that people of that time, they liked soft, so this was probably how their interiors looked.
Very early on, Roland and I talked about the look of the film, and we looked at images of Vermeer and Georges de Latour, and that's very specific in terms of like how they use daylight.
You're a lying knave. You went.
Can I get you a drink? Billy!
For example, a really single source of a candle or a torch or something like this. So yeah, obviously that was something inspiring to us. We need to get the lights, the candles on.
It is nice.
To figure this out. Well, I think what's absolutely fascinating about this project is that in conjunction with all those new development for the digital cinematography, you have a possibility to actually really take advantage of things like candlelight and firelight, and I think for a period piece like this is really what makes it real.
What shall you judge, Ben? We do what we have to survive and survive well in this life.
First of all, it's the nicest period for a costume designer, and for a German costume designer it was totally unexpected to make a film about English history, 16th century. It was a law which color is allowed to which class. So by law, commoners, it was not allowed to wear green, red, black, but of course allowed for noble people. And all this is very simple to explain because to dye was very expensive. For green, for black, you needed a lot of color. Silk was made in China or India, so the prices were very high.
Well, I've been in a lot of costumes and makeup, you know, and very few Tudor clothes still exist. What's rather special about the clothes that have been made for this film is that they've been made exactly as they would have been made in Elizabeth's times, which is both fascinating intellectually, of course, but it certainly makes the corsets very hard. They're lovely designs. And as I've studied the whole Tudor period extensively for years, it's a very exciting thing for me.
It is hours of preparation to get ready. I really like wearing the dresses. I mean, of course, because we're not used to it, you know, there's some adjustments to be made. But there's nothing like having that structure to really give you the posture, the weight. All those hours in hair and makeup, I think, somehow does help because you look in the mirror and you're a completely different character.
But how could one ever love the moon after first having seen the sun?
I think all the various departments, costume, hair, makeup, Roland, etc., have recreated their version. It's a little bit more rock and roll in that it's not the sugar-coated Elizabethan age. The makeup is white, the wigs are red for Elizabeth, and it's very striking images, which I personally like.
We all know William Shakespeare, the most famous author of all time, writer of 37 plays, 154 sonnets, several epic poems. But what if I told you Shakespeare never wrote a single word?
First of all, it was for us very important to have a story with a very strong theme.
All art is political, Johnson, otherwise it would just be decoration.
The word is mightier than the sword. And then we wanted to kind of really celebrate William Shakespeare as an author.
Wipe his memory for all time.
I'm afraid that is not possible, my lord.
Because it's so amazing when you realize all of a sudden how many amazing plays this man wrote. Then you all of a sudden like kind of really ask, you know, who was this person? And I think the whole authorship question comes out of the fact that there was a man who was just the first modern writer who in more than 30 plays summed up what we humans are.
You shall begin rehearsals immediately. It must not be performed until I tell you, and you may only have a day's notice. Oh, and congratulations, you've had a poem published today.
Published? What? Oh, what? Do you mean like in a book?
Well, my first question was, you know, what is true about this? I had heard inklings. There's like an authorship question. And then when you read a script about it, you all of a sudden say to yourself, wow, this is an amazing story.
And action!
They are to be beheaded. Your son is going to be killed, Edward, by his own mother. Put that in one of your plays.
Basically, the more and more I read, the more I think like William Shakespeare has not written these works. Actually had nothing to do with it. I'm always like drawn to these kind of things when there is like kind of some sort of something there where like kind of people could argue about.
Will isn't even a writer.
Well, the authorship question arose in the 1700s because there's no real documentation or evidence of a primary source that William Shakespeare wrote the plays. It turns out there's no manuscripts written in Shakespeare's hands that exist or have ever existed that we know of. There's no letter to or from William Shakespeare that we have ever seen. The plays were not published until 7 years after his death.
My plays, my sonnets. Keep them safe.
I've always really loved Shakespeare and been moved by performing and watching it. But I do feel, you know, in school, and I still feel it's that somehow he's been hidden from us. He's just this like voice in a void, in a vacuum. And we don't know the guy who wrote this thing, and it's important that we do.
Band of brothers.
William Shakespeare wrote so many plays, and not one of them is left. It feels like there is something odd about that.
A romantic tragedy in iambic pentameter. All of it. Is that possible? Of course it is.
There's been various people have been suggested to be the true author. About 100 years ago, a man said, well, let's look at this a different way. Let's look at the qualities that the playwright would have had to have in order to write this body of work. And let's figure out who that man could be in the world of the Elizabethan court. And so Thomas Loney wrote a book, and he said the true author would probably have had these qualities. He would have spoken Greek, he would have spoken Latin, he would have spoken French, he would have probably gone to Italy because so many of the plays take place in Italy. He probably was a nobleman because in most of the plays the characters are noblemen. He was probably a lawyer because a lot of the law, in fact all of the law in the plays, is quite accurate for 16th century Elizabethan England.
Take each man's censure, but reserve thy judgment.
And so he took all of these things and he tried to figure out who matched these qualities. And he discovered this man named Edward de Vere, who was the 17th Earl of Oxford. And so he wrote this book. And that was in 1910, and that's where Oxford really became a possible author of the plays.
10,000 souls, all listening to the writings of one man, the ideas of one man. That's power.
There is contemporary mention that Edward de Vere, the 17th Earl of Oxford, was the most famous playwright in court, and that he had to use an assumed name. There is documentation from the late 1600s that say that, but they don't specifically say which plays he wrote, but they do say that he wrote plays. And the thing you have to remember, the man from Stratford that we call William Shakespeare didn't call himself William Shakespeare. He called himself William Shaxper.
One way or another, I will have my guineas.
There's only several examples of his own handwriting, and in all of those cases, he spells his name last name Shaksper, Shaxper, and various versions of that.
Shakespeare.
I think there's a stronger case to be made that the William Shakespeare that we're told about at school maybe isn't the William Shakespeare who wrote the plays. Whether it is a whole other person from a different social rank is for discussion, but I think there's a valid question.
Will Shakespeare!
Hello, Ben.
A command performance! Fraud! Counterfeiter of wit!
And what we are taught about Shakespeare is deductive guesswork. And we're not told it's deductive guesswork. We are told he must have gone to London. He must have learned these languages because the poet must have spoken the languages in order to write the plays. He must have gone to Italy in what some scholars call Shakespeare's lost years. They're lost because we have no record of these years. But at the same time, there's the problem that whoever wrote the plays almost most definitely lived in Italy for some period of time because of all of the Italian plays. You know, Romeo and Juliet, Two Gentlemen of Verona, The Merchant of Venice.
Speak hands for me!
But yet we have no evidence that Shakespeare ever left England. And yet Edward de Vere lived in Italy for 2 years and traveled to all these places that are written about.
It is the East, and Juliet is the sun. You cannot play Romeo.
Only Will Shakespeare can pump the life into Romeo's veins.
What's interesting is that now I realise that, you know, scholars have been really debating this and that it's not a sort of crackpot theory. A lot of the most intelligent and open-minded people that I have since asked about it, and articles have been written, people have studied for many years, looking at the exact writing, all the different texts, and I think it's very interesting. I mean, you can quote Shakespeare himself on it, you know, there's stranger things in heaven and earth, Horatio, than are dreamt of in your philosophy.
As far as I'm concerned, ever since I started acting Shakespeare and studying Shakespeare, I personally was convinced that whoever Shakespeare was a member of a very small, committed circle, mostly aristocrats, because only the nobles at the time had the kind of education and had travelled.
It's a very strange thought that he might not have solely written the plays, but co-authorship in Elizabethan times was incredibly common. So when you get into it, it does become very, very interesting, and that's what the film's about.
I know you have them. All his manuscripts.
They were destroyed.
I don't think there's ever going to be a real end to this debate because no smoking gun has been found by either people who consider Shakespeare the author, which are called Stratfordians, or people who think the Earl of Oxford, who are called Oxfordians, wrote the plays. Neither can find a piece of paper that says, I wrote such and such play.
I'm like a very visual person. So for me, for example, to see the signatures of Shakespeare which survived tell me he was illiterate. Just how the signature looks.
Write something for us.
We haven't got any ink.
We know for a fact that Shakespeare's father was illiterate because John Shakespeare signed his name with an X in legal documents. And we know for a fact that William Shakespeare's daughters were illiterate as well because they too signed their names with X's in documents.
Whenever you see other signatures of that time, they're incredibly beautiful. They're learned people, learned men, and they kind of prided themselves in having a signature which really had a flow, and that this guy had this crackly signature, it just doesn't make sense to me.
I want to thank my actors, has brought my words to life. Thank you!
I think Roland is brave to take this on. I think that we'll have some people saying, how could he? The sort of irony in all of this is that at the end of the day, it's still a celebration of Shakespeare because we're still all obsessed with him, the works, the characters. They are sacred texts, but at the same time, we can all be open-minded and look at new theories of why it looks unlikely that it was solely one person's input and not be threatened by it.
Well, you know, I think a lot of people are afraid to touch that subject matter. I see it more like a way, you know, to have a really, really exciting subject matter out there.
The voices, I can't stop them, they come to me. The sweet longings of a maiden, the surging ambitions of a courtier, the foul designs of a murderer, the wretched pleas of his victims. Only when I put their words, their voices to parchment, only then is my mind quieted, at peace.
People taxed to the point of starvation. Spain running the new world. Open revolt in Ireland. Catholic plots everywhere you turn. And how do the Cecils spend their time and energy? Shutting up theatre. A theatre, for God's sake. It's madness. No wonder the mob hates them so.
Out. Henry, how many people were at that play?
I'm not sure. 2,000? Maybe more.
And how many performances are there of a play like that?
5 or 6, I suppose.
New service. So, by the beard, 10,000 souls, all listening to the writings of one man, the ideas of one man. That's power, Robert. And if there's one thing the Cecils understand, that is power. New service.
And since when did words ever win a kingdom? I think I'll keep my sword. Thank you very much.
Out.
Boys! My boys! I've got it. Oh, we just finished it about an hour ago. Well, what do you think?
It's quite colourful.
Well, what in God's name is it?
That's my coat of arms. It cost a bloody fortune, but by God, you can call me a gentleman now.
Yes, well, I can't quite make out the motto. Non
sans droikt. Droikt.
Not without right.
Oh.
Not without right. You went to him, didn't you? You're a lying knave. You went to him.
Can I get you a drink? Billy!
Oh, what? You've already killed off one competitor. Now you want another one dead as well.
I literally no idea what you're speaking about.
No, I swore to him that I wouldn't tell you his name. I swore it. I swore it. Do you have any idea of what he might do to me? Do you? Will isn't even a writer. You know, he can't even...
Why don't we just go up?
No, get on, hand me. Here. Here. A quill. Write something for us. Amaze us with your verse. Your wit. No? Well, try astounding us with the letter E. Or an I? Sir, it's just a straight line.
We haven't got any ink.
So, I am gone for 3 days, and you somehow managed to allow her to spend all of them solely in the company of the Earl of Essex. Do not think because I was in London I did not know exactly what went on here in my absence.
He is an earl, Father. I cannot deny him.
Of course not. You don't deny him anything. You find excuses. She is reading. She is unwell. She is seeing the ambassador of Russia. Use your imagination, Robert. Whatever will you do when I'm gone? Tell me about this plan.
What is this man doing in my house? You will leave at once. My husband is quite ill.
It was your husband who sent for me, my lady.
And I am dismissing you.
Are you Johnson? He's asking for you.
Excuse me, my lady.
In the sweat of thy face shalt thou eat bread, till thou return to the earth. Wast thou taken? Because thou art dust, and to dust thou shalt return.
Were my worth greater, my duty would show greater. Meantime, as it is bound to your lordship, to whom I wish long life.